So now I have an opportunity to talk to you here on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is both a thrill and a little terrifying. Because this speech, this sermon, is a little different from what we usually do here. And I begin with a question that I don't mean rhetorically. Why do we need the synagogue? We're about to talk about the campaign, the renovations, the plan. That's why the drawings that you saw last year are back up in the foyer. We're going to talk about these big plans we unveiled last year at this time. But before we can even do that, we have to ask this question because it informs everything. So one more time I will say it. Why do we even need the synagogue? We'll get to it. A friend of mine and I were just having a conversation last week. He had been to Israel, 36 years old, first trip to Israel. We were talking about the highlights. And this friend of mine, I don't think he would describe himself as a particularly religious person, but for him, one of the highlights was the first time he entered the old city and saw the Kotel. Now, usually the rabbi doesn't ask for a show of hands, but just to make sure that this idea will get across, how many of you have been to the Kotel? Very good. And I would be willing to wager that each and every one of you remembers that first time you were there. Because just like my friend, I remember the first time I was there, in March of 2010, when Heather and I visited Israel for the first time together. Seeing the Kotel, middle of the week, just a regular evening, we just arrived in Jerusalem, coming around a corner, stepping through an opening, and there it was. The Kotel in front of me, in front of us, took my breath away. Something you read about and read about, but then to see it. And just, it wasn't Shabbat, just a regular weeknight. The way the light reflected off the stones, the people, there's an energy, I think we can all agree, to that place, that very special holy place that stopped us dead in our tracks. Immediately, I felt that this was the spot for the Jewish people. After all, it's the only wall left standing from what once surrounded the Second Temple. And there's a midrash that the rabbis say it's actually built where there was a wall from the First Temple. Even more powerful. Synagogues all over the world are built to try and capture that same awesome feeling each one of us who's been to the Kotel felt that first time, and maybe subsequent times as well. The feeling of being somewhere extraordinary. The feeling of being somewhere holy. The Kotel reminds us of the temple, a direct link to the holiest spot in our history. The synagogue is supposed to do that too. The ark is supposed to remind us that there was an ark in the temple. The bima, a raised platform, because there was a bima in the temple. The ner tamid, the eternal flame, reminds us that there was a menorah in the temple that was burning because of the Kohanim non-stop, day and night and day, never going out. The same menorah of the story of Hanukkah. Even the direction we face in the synagogue, east. We're not just facing Israel, we're not just facing Jerusalem, we're facing the Kotel. We're facing what used to be the temple. And if you think about this building in particular, I don't know if we've taken it for granted or if we've overlooked it, but from the street, someone once said to me, the building from the outside looks like it belongs in the old city. And it really does. This building was designed to look like the temple, like our temple. I mean, we can't be in Israel all the time. We can't visit the actual Kotel. We can visit the synagogue. We can visit Shaarei Tzedek. But I'm not sure that when each of us walks in here, we have that same awesome feeling. So I've been trying to figure out why. Why do we need the synagogue? A year ago, we unveiled a plan, a campaign we're calling Lador Vador, from generation to generation. It is an exciting and ambitious renovation project to our entire building. And last year, we know it got you buzzing, for sure. But of course, there were questions on everyone's mind. Sure, the drawings look great, but what is this going to cost? Not only are there big plans for big changes, new features, there is a ton of work in deferred maintenance we've been putting off that we have to get to. We have to get inside the walls, inside the ceilings, in a building that opened in 1949 and really hasn't been touched very much in 70 years. Some people in the last year have told me, it's great, we're all excited, we like the direction the synagogue making changes, trying to become more relevant, more meaningful, but this is just too ambitious a project. It is just too big of an ask of our congregation. And there were even rumors just a few months ago that this campaign had fallen flat, that it was done. I'm here to tell you on behalf of the board of directors, the clergy, the staff, that is most certainly not the case. L'Dor Vador, our campaign, is very much alive. However, with a project of this size, of this magnitude, so complex with so many moving parts, we have to take our time to do our due diligence. Before we can begin a campaign to raise money, we need to get a sense of what it will cost and what the timelines for the work will be, particularly because we recognize there could be very many surprises along the way. That is what we've been doing over the last year. And we want to acknowledge and thank Carol and Barry McCartan and the Asper Foundation for their tremendous support this past year to do the work we've done, the meetings, the research. Also to our president, Frank Hector, and to the entire board of directors for their commitment to a very important project. The drawings from last year are back to remind us of this plan, which is a hope, a dream. The drawings are just conceptual, though. As we get closer, several steps down the line, we will engage focus groups made of all of you. No question. Our congregants will have a say in these decisions. Your input will guide this project. But first, we need to know what that project will be. We've put together a committee, a campaign committee. We're proud to say our chair of this committee is Neil Duboff. And at one of the meetings of this campaign committee, the conversation centered around the question that we opened with today. Why do we need the synagogue? What is the role of Shaarei Tzedek in this community, or really of any synagogue in any community for that matter? I think there's a problem with the name, not Shaarei Tzedek, synagogue. Or even in Hebrew, Beit Knesset. Both of these words emphasize the fact that this is a place of assembly. Synagogue from the Greek, assembly. Beit Knesset, house of assembly. We could call it Beit Tfilah, a house of prayer, but we don't, because you really can pray anywhere. You just need a minyan. We could call it a Beit Midrash, a house of study, but again, that could happen anywhere, and there are schools that aren't synagogues. So we call it a Beit Knesset, and it calls us back to a time when the synagogue was the building in the community, in the hood, where if you wanted to have a big event, that was your only choice. A bris, a bar bat mitzvah, a wedding, a party. Jewish people wanted to get together, it had to be at the synagogue. But that wasn't in 2019. Nowadays, you can do these things anywhere. You can have a bris or a baby naming at home. You can rent out restaurants or other facilities, talk to a teacher, get your hands on a Torah, have a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah. You can have a wedding, really anywhere. You can get a bunch of Jewish people together for a Jewish event outside of the synagogue. So this idea of a house of assembly has really lost its flavor. What I believe we have overlooked, and I am probably more guilty of it than anyone, is that this has always been more than just a meeting place. This is our holy place. Makom Kadosh, the sacred spot in our community. We use this word a lot, holy. But what does it mean? Just last week, I was with the grade 7 class at Gray Academy, and we were talking about behavior in synagogue. And I asked that group of very bright individuals, what is so special about the synagogue? One student said, it's holy because it's the house of God. And then he said, where God dwells. And I thought the fact he used air quotes was brilliant, because he got it like I got it. Didn't we learn at Gray Academy God is everywhere? So how can God be everywhere and yet have this special house? And I'll be honest, with no offense intended, I don't think going around talking about the need to maintain a house of God resonates with our community and audience in 2019. So I tried a different angle. I asked myself, who comes to synagogue? When I had my bar mitzvah here 21 years ago, I remember walking around with the Torah. I was slightly more terrified than I am at this exact moment. And I got back to the front, and I remember saying to my mom, who are all those people? I don't recognize any of those people. And she said, those are the people who come to synagogue on a regular basis. Now, today is not one of those days. Today is a very special day. It's like in the days of the temple, when people all over Israel would come to the temple on Sukkot, on Shavuot, on Pesach, make these pilgrimages. The rest of the year, they didn't go to the temple. Today, tomorrow, Erev Yom Kippur, the day of Yom Kippur, these are our 3-4 days where we come. And yes, there are many moments where we celebrate joy. We have simchas. People come to honor a birthday or an anniversary before setting out on a big trip, maybe a trip to Israel. And sometimes they bring babies for baby namings. And sometimes we have bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. We even sometimes have weddings. We have moments where we celebrate our ups, the highlights, the high moments in our community and in our lives. But even if we did not have a single one of those, we would still need a synagogue. Because in addition to the ups, this is a place where we make note of the downs. I've worked here for 15 years, and I never really asked myself this question: who comes to synagogue regularly? I started coming here when I was 19 years old because it was a job. I got hired to be a Torah reader, and I knew that made me different from other people. But I never really scanned the crowd and thought, what do all these people have in common? Why are they here week after week? And what about the people who come weekday mornings? The dozen or so people who are here morning after morning, 7:30 a.m. Or the ones who come at Mincha Mariv, 6 p.m. If you come to synagogue regularly, why do you come to synagogue regularly? Because let's be honest, we don't all do that. And I will tell you that if I did not have a job, when I go on vacation, I'm not seeking out a synagogue. So who goes to synagogue? With the help of the grade 7 class at Gray Academy, I realized that the one thing that almost all of these people, I won't say all, because I would never want to generalize. I was once told all generalizations are bad. I would never want to do that, but I will tell you, and people may not be aware of it, but I believe that most of the people who come to synagogue with some regularity come here because they are hurt. They come here because they are hurt where it's the worst place to be hurt, where you can't see. They come because they're hurt on the inside. That kind of hurt, that kind of pain that I believe each one of us is feeling, has felt, or maybe is feeling right now, they come to synagogue for relief from that pain. Someone they love has died. Or it's the Yortzeit, and they're remembering someone they love has died. Or they're lonely. Or they're new, and they don't know anybody, and they're scared, and they feel lost. Or they're hungry. We get people who come who are literally hungry. Or they're sick, or they know someone who is sick. Or they aren't hurt anymore, but once upon a time they were hurt, and they came and they started coming back because being here, being around all the people who come regularly, helped them with that pain. When I think back to the Kotel, the most moving part of the Kotel for me is not seeing the Kotel from a distance, this amazing panorama, but getting up close, touching those stones, feeling their energy, and then noticing the pieces of paper shoved between the cracks. How many of those notes do you think are thank you notes? The equivalent of a bris or baby naming or a bar mitzvah or a wedding, the joyful moments. Maybe there are some. Maybe there are people who have had an amazing recovery from a sickness, from an illness. They go to Israel and they say thank you and you put on a note. I believe there are notes like that, but I believe the vast majority of those notes reflect the same feeling that so many people who come to synagogue on a regular basis have. They're notes of pain. They're notes calling out for an answer to the hurt. The holy place in a Jewish community isn't just the big meeting place. It's where the people can go when they're hurt. When you find yourself in times of trouble and in your hour of darkness. The synagogue it's like you're lost at sea, adrift. You don't know which way you're pointing. Darkness, storm, chaos surrounds you, anxiety at every turn, and then a glimmer of hope, a lighthouse, a beacon. That is the synagogue. There's a line in one of the Psalms, Psalm 34 to be exact. It made its way into the Rabbi's manual, one of the offerings that you can give for a family at a funeral. It says, God is close to the brokenhearted. And I know the cynics among us would snicker. Sure, I've been brokenhearted and I didn't feel God close to me. But from where I stand and what I see, I think you could actually flip it. The brokenhearted get close to God. And this is the place where that happens. Remember just 11 months ago? There was a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and it rocked us as a people, a holy place invaded with violence, hatred, and death. So where did we as a community go to mourn, to cry, and to band together? We came here. We came to this synagogue. We came to this Beit Knesset, but not because it's a house of assembly. We came here because it's Makom Kadosh, the holy place. Whether we realize it or not, by having this place open, even if we don't use it, especially if we don't use it, but if we support it, we are all partners in the holiest work, something at the core of Jewish teaching. Throughout the Torah, there are so many mitzvot, there's so many commandments, we can get bogged down, we can get lost in the rules. So I'm always interested in the ones that repeat, the ones that get mentioned more often. And over half a dozen times throughout the Torah, we are told specifically to watch out for a group of people. In Hebrew, they are Hager, Hayatom, V'ha'almanah. Throughout the Torah, we're told, take care of the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him. You shall not ill-treat any widow or orphan. When you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger or the orphan. You shall not take a widow's garment and pawn. Over and over and over. We're told to give tithes to them. We're told to invite them specifically to our festivals. We're told to feed them. We're told to look out for them. And it's not just the Torah, it's the prophets too. Isaiah, uphold the rights of the orphan, defend the cause of the widow. Jeremiah, do not oppress the stranger, the orphan, the widow. Even Job, when he's trying to argue against God that he is a good man, what does he say? For I saved the poor man who cried out, the orphan who had none to help him. I received the blessing of the lost. I gladdened the heart of the widow. 3,000 years later, it's the same. We still have the ger, the yatom, and the almanah. The stranger, someone who just doesn't fit. The yatom, someone saying Kaddish. Did you know that the mourner's Kaddish in Hebrew is actually Kaddish Yatom? The almanah, someone who's lost the love of his or her life. Someone lonely, going at it through life alone. These are the folks who come to shul regularly. Lost, alone, and hurt. Even the characters we study on Rosh Hashanah, Hagar, Ishmael, Hannah, they all have that in common too. They all call out to God in their hour of darkness. For a people whose very existence has survived because of the power of hope, I know that the importance of the synagogue is something we can very much get behind. God is close to the brokenhearted, but the brokenhearted are even closer to God. And the synagogue is where that happens. That's why we need this holy place in our community. It can't be replaced by a school. It can't be replaced by a community center, even if they're both state of the art. There's no replacing the holy place. A place that provides sanctuary, quite literally, for people in desperate need. The Torah reminds us often, you were once strangers yourselves in the land of Egypt. And if we were strangers once, we could easily become strangers again. We could easily find ourselves, each and every one of us, lost when we'll need the synagogue more than ever. That's why, unfortunately, today I can't give you any numbers. I can't tell you what it will cost. And I can't tell you how long it will take because we just don't know. We're still trying to figure it out. But when we do, I hope you'll remember what we have reminded ourselves, that what we do here at the core as a place for those in crisis matters so much. In a world where we are more in tune with mental health, anxiety, depression, the synagogue is needed more than ever. And that's why we have to do the work now. Because it has been too long, we have left it too long, and if we're going to open this place up, we may as well do it right. We may as well go big and make changes that will be permanent, that will allow this holy place to thrive. We're not asking for campaign pledges or commitments. We're asking for patience, for trust, and for you to buy in. In the days of the temple, everyone every year supported the temple, the entire community, whether you used it or not. Even the folks who only used it a few times a year. But the entire nation bought in. That hasn't changed either. For all the work we do, for everything we try to do and want to keep doing better, to increase Shabbat attendance like we have, to increase high holiday attendance like we have, like you have, to increase the number of bookings of bar and bat mitzvahs and weddings and other events. We cannot do it without you. On the cards, on your seats, you can make a donation this year to the synagogue. If you can give a lot, give a lot. If you can give a little, give a little. This is to help us keep going, to help us keep doing what we have been doing and what we are committed to continuing. As well as general donations, there are specific options to sponsor a synagogue family Shabbat dinner or to enhance a Shabbat Kiddush, either in celebration of Simcha or in memory of a loved one. Our goal at the end of all of this is that when we walk into this building or when we drive by on the street, we will have that feeling that you get at the Kotel. That this place matters. That this place is nothing ordinary. And it's a place in our city, on the banks of that river, our lighthouse, our symbol of hope. To be there for us and our children and their children and their children. L'dor v'dor. From generation to generation. Wishing all of you a Shanah Tovah u'mitukah, a sweet, healthy, and happy new year filled with promise, filled with success and fulfillment as we join together proudly in the holy work we do here that we sometimes don't even realize. Thank you. Shanah Tovah.